Hi, Beth. I've got some news for you.
Right.
Cycle Hub. I'll let you know later.
Oh, thank you.
We might be a select crowd tonight, but all the best people are here and not at Cycle City.
Yeah.
Oh, the Sheffield lot not going to join this call?
Yeah,
well?
we're hoping to say hello.
I'm having major fear of missing out, really, about this conference.
I know, not the only one.
Why is this one any better than any other?
Well, I think it's the biggie, I think, isn't it?
Mm.
I think it's the biggest active travel conference, really. It's two days, isn't it? But I just couldn't justify it would have been 2 nights away from home and the dog and the kids, and trying to do all of that logistically was just going to be a nightmare. So I had to say no this time.
Right, so welcome everyone. Yes, for those who are joining, we are split across multiple sites tonight, but we are hoping that a small but perfectly formed group will also join us from Cycle City in Sheffield, where there's a conference, the sort of it claims to be the biggest conference on active travel in England. I don't know if that's true, but that's where some of our numbers are. So yeah, we've got a slightly different format tonight, and so I'm Claire Stocks, and I'm going to be facilitating tonight. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you could put yourself on mute when you're not speaking, that's handy, and do make use of the chat as we go along. The first half tonight, in terms of what we're doing tonight, the first half, we're going to just have a bit of an open news round and hear from. Be brilliant to hear from people. If there's anything to highlight in your area, you can either put your hand up to share that or share it in the chat, and I can share that with the group. There's always stuff going on, and one of the great things about Ideas for Biz is we usually have a fantastic spread of people from around the country, which is one of our strengths, I think, that we share these perspectives. So that's one thing we're going to do in a minute, because Bob, who normally does the news update, is presenting at Cycle City, so he's not going to be here this week. We also thought that might just bleed naturally into a bit of a discussion about future speakers. So we've got another couple of weeks to run on this run. We're going to have our last Ideas with Biz for the summer on the 19th of July, when we've got a very exciting speaker talking about disco bikes. But yeah, we'd like to get your thoughts on ideas for speakers in the future. And then our main speaker tonight is, we're very privileged to be joined by a chap called David Dansky, who's a cycle trainer by trade and works on multiple projects to help get people cycling more. But he's also actually joining us tonight to talk about a very personal experience of a road crash that he was involved in, and what that was like, and the things that it taught him about the campaigning, what we're campaigning for, and lessons for us all, perhaps. So that is how things are going to go tonight, and we'll probably finish by 6 tonight because we've only got one speaker. So any questions before we kick off? Have I said all the intro? I think so. Can't see any hands. So on the news, so I'm going to try and look at some names who I know. So I've got Elizabeth from Leeds. Actually, Ruth always asks for people to put their location in there, rename themselves with their location, which is handy. So if you don't know me, I'm Claire, and I'm based in Manchester, where I campaign with a group called Walk Ride Greater Manchester. So I can share a bit about that in a minute. But I did have one item I was going to share about Active Travel England. But while I'm doing that, perhaps the rest of you, we've got Dorset, we've got Brighton, we've got Bath, we've got Newcastle, we've got Cambridge, we've got Buxton, we've got Brent. If you don't want to put your hand up to speak, then you can always put it in the chat, and I'll read it out for you into the group. So Adam in Bath. and I've also got a little prop with me this week, so I don't think we'll need to keep to time. But if we do, just in case people get overly enthusiastic, I've got this handy facilitation device, which I might use or I might not. So Adam, over to you.
Right. I've been, just to be aware that Active Travel England, through Brian Deegan, they're actually working with Baines Council and WECA councils to try and develop the Active Travel Fund 2022-23 bids. In the case of Baines, Bath and North East Somerset, they are having a presentation to what they call the Journey to Net Zero Forum, which is a community groups that the council hosts, and they'll be presenting their tranche, what they call tranche 4 bids. The other side that's also come out, which might be useful, I was talking to Mark Strong about this, was some of the FOIs imply that Active Travel England may be requesting 3-year bids for Active Travel Fund. So purely from one of the comments in one of the FOIs, I can't remember what it was, but rather than it being, because we've been focused on trying to understand what was submitted, what hasn't been submitted, etc., what was denied. So that's ongoing. So that might be quite useful in terms of getting that information out there. But the critical thing right now is Active Travel England will want to work with the highways authorities to help them develop those bids if they ask for help. The other thing that's also happened is that the FOI requests for what actually went out, the official notification seemed to be a standard letter, which basically had about 3 pages of various rules and regulations around the funding. And then, unfortunately, each highways authority could then request to find out what areas were not, or what bids, why they were rejected. So the letter they got only said which ones they were received, approved, and also they had usually attached them as a spreadsheet with conditions for particular schemes. So in the case of Bristol Council, the one they submitted as part of the WECA combined bid, that one had 3 statements in there saying that if you do this scheme, you need to put in place this pedestrian crossing or widen this particular section of cycle track that you're going to be building. But there was some there were conditions that were clearly stated. I can probably post the FOI that I had answered in the comments. That's pretty much the news I've got, but be aware right now your highways authority should or must be talking to Active Travel England and asking them for help should they want to, because they do have 100-odd engineers with expertise in the area, which will probably guarantee you'll get your Active Travel funding tranche 4 bid through.
Thank you, Adam. And Scott and Beth, are either of your updates about Active Travel England? If not, I might just interject one here because it relates to what Adam was saying.
Mine was a question of Adam. I don't know if I know the answer.
You go then. You go.
It was just that I've been trying to contact Active Travel England to ask for some advice, and I can't get hold of anyone. So I was wondering if you had a contact. I mean, I could message Brian, but that feels a little bit like taking.
That's how I did it.
Oh, did you? Oh, okay. All right.
I emailed him because I had a meeting with head of strategic transport at Baines, and she sat there and said, "So what do I think is wrong with, or where the problems are?" And I said, basically, you've got a resourcing issue in terms of being able to develop schemes, because everybody, I think every highways authority doesn't quite have the. There are very few that have the skills. So I had Brian. I messaged Brian and said, "Do you mind if they reach out to you?" And he said, and he gave me his email address, so I probably won't post it here or talk about it, but please feel free. I've got his DFT email address, which is surprisingly very easy to work out. You know, his first name is Brian, his second name is Deegan, and then it's dft.gov.uk.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. On that note, then I think I will just share the slide I put together on because this is topical relating to Active Travel England. So I'll just quickly share my screen. So as a bit of a sort of news junkie, this is my attempt to show you the org structure of Active Travel England based on what I picked up over Twitter. So some of this has been announced and covered by Bob, but this is what this is how I think it looks, but it could be slightly wrong. So so yeah, if this is how I think it fits together. So these were announced in the last week or so. So obviously we know Chris Boardman is the National Active Travel Commissioner. And for those of you, if anyone's new to Ideas of Beers, Active Travel England is this new body that's been set up this year that we really hope is going to make the difference. It's going to monitor but also fund active travel. So we knew obviously Boardman, but he's now been confirmed in that role because these were all shadow roles. So he is that's been confirmed as a, full-time. Then the new announcements, this was over the last 10 days or so, is a guy called Danny Williams, who's been appointed as the Chief Executive Officer on the left there. He's on Twitter, City Cyclists. And I think he's based around Kingston. A lot of his tweets are about the infrastructure around Kingston, so that's interesting. Then Louise Wilkinson is the Chief Operating Officer, and she's like an internal appointment. So she's already been working for the Cabinet Office in the Finance Department. So Chief Operating Officer, that's a role that's basically, all about the money, risks, keeping the show on the road, that sort of role. Then, of course, we've got our friend Brian, who's head of infrastructure, head of inspection, sorry. And I've put that picture there on the right because that's him at Cycle City this week. So what's been interesting in the last 2 weeks, I would say that Brian and Chris and Active Travel England, their Twitter account has started to become much more active. So yeah, they're hosting clinics at Cycle City this week, which they haven't done that before. So it'd be really interesting after this event to kind of get the mood music on that. But a couple of other roles that I've picked up. So there's a guy called Graham Grant, who Sally knows. Sally is on the call from the Newcastle Cycle Campaign. Graham, head of working for Newcastle Highways, has left there to join as head of planning and development, working alongside Brian. I'm not sure of the pecking order, obviously. And some of you who are in the sort of northwest of England may have worked or come across Kirsty McCaskill-Baxter, who did work for Transport for Greater Manchester, and she's the head of comms, although that's still one of those interim roles because they all have to apply for the roles full time. So that is my attempt to show the sort of org chart. And then interestingly, just that box at the top, it sounds like appointing non-executive directors as well. It was interesting that Isabel Clement of Wheels for All, who we've had on here many times, shared on a tweet or somewhere that she's been asked to be a non-executive director, although again, that's an interim non-executive director role, so it looks like they're having to be confirmed. And also that looks like some of these roles, all of them had the interviews were done by a panel that wasn't all DFT internal sort of transport wonks. Daisy Narayan, who was at Sustrans and is a brilliant placemaking expert, she said that she was on the interview panel for some of these jobs down there. So that seemed like a positive mood. And then the very last thing is that obviously these people top right, the active travel commissioners, aren't part of this org chart, but they are all still, I think, interestingly, watching Boardman, some of his, talking up the roles of the other active travel commissioners. We've had Adam Tranter on here, Sarah Story now in GM, so and South Yorkshire role vacant. So anyway, that's my little attempt to pull together the latest on Active Travel England from the news that I picked up. I hope that's useful. If you know any of those people, then that's going to be a good way in. So that's over to Scott now. Have you got any news, Scott?
Thank you, Claire. I actually also wanted to ask Adam a question on what he shared before about the Tranche 4 stuff. I'm curious to know whether Adam or anybody else on the call has any knowledge of what's happening with two-tier authorities, because Adam, you rightly pointed out that highways authorities are being asked to engage with Active Travel England. There are lots of places in the country, including where I am, where it's two-tier, and where, the example that I have in mind is where there's a council in a two-tier environment that is very pro and wants to take forward some schemes to Active Travel England, but the Highways Authority is not pro-active travel and hasn't to date put any schemes forward during the whole process. So I wondered whether anybody had any thoughts on, effectively, I've been advising politicians to go directly to Active Travel England to highlight the gap of ambition at the county level.
Okay, I can jump in if that's okay. Basically, in April, April 22nd, I believe, or thereabouts, the network management statutory duty was updated for highways authorities. So if you search for traffic 2004 COVID, there is a statement there that basically commits all highways authorities to basically deliver on the gear change document, as well as being a lot more expressive. So I suspect where you're at now is that you probably need to be challenging the council executive, not the politicians, and asking them how they will be addressing the fact that they have statutory duty to deliver on this space. Also, what's not clear at the moment is that I know Active Travel England are very much about carrot and not so much stick, but there is a situation where Active Travel England have the ability or the powers to remove general DFT funding from highways authorities. And I think my personal opinion on this is that Active Travel England, when they send out the formal notifications for invitations for tranche 4 bids, which I'm assuming will be done by the end of autumn, I believe is what I think is now going to be the case. That though they need to be much clearer to these highways authorities that they cannot just ignore this, and they do need to start seriously engaging and actually trying to submit serious bids. But that's my own opinion on this. But if you read that Traffic Management Act stuff, again, I'll find it and post it in the chat. It does make it explicitly clear that this is a directorship of or council executive officers concern and not a political concern anymore.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. I'm aware of all those things. I know that for a fact that one of the two counties I have in mind, they believe that their transport is for drivers, not for anybody else. So they will be ignoring the traffic management guidance. They won't even give it.
Not Wiltshire, is it?
No, it's
Wiltshire's
not.
horrendous.
Southeast, East Sussex in particular, I'm thinking of, and Kent's not much better.
While we're on the Southeast, Becky posted in the chat that Transport for Southeast are consulting on a £45 billion strategic investment plan, which includes many road schemes. Becky, I don't know if you want to just add anything on that, whether there's anything, whether you're looking for any thoughts or whether you're campaigning actively on that, or whether you just wanted to flag it up.
Only that it's topical, very topical, because they've got a consultation at the moment, and that East Sussex is, as Scott's saying, is very poor on sustainable transport, and they're leading this organisation of 16 local authorities, including the chief officer, Rupert Clubb, and the chief kind of politician, Keith Glazier. They're both drawn from East Sussex, and it's actually based at East Sussex. So it's really important for people in the Southeast. Thanks.
Thanks, Becky. And before I come to Ruth, there was also a question in the chat, which was two, which I'll ask now. One is, Ailey has asked the question, has any local council ever asked a cycling campaigning group to sign an NDA before they share information? Now, no one's responded in the chat because we usually got a very lively chat, so I'm assuming the answer is no. But Has anyone on this call, has that ever happened to them?
Evidently not.
Looks like the
not.
answer's no, Ailey.
no.
Why
Well,
did you ask? Has it happened to you?
Well, it's happened to the Cycle Islington little team who deal with the local council. They were asked if they would sign this NDA, and you know, we've been talking to them for years without an NDA. We haven't shared any information that we shouldn't have. We've always been respectful of, you know, confidential information that we've got, and all of a sudden we've been asked to sign this NDA. So, well, it was just interesting.
The only time that's happened to me is with a sort of not a campaigning hat on, but a sort of small business hat on, where, you know, if you're talking to another company about something that might be commercially sensitive, like their pricing information, or so. That's, do you get the impression it's because it's about sharing the plans for what's going to happen, or could it be about a commercial thing? Or
I don't think it's about a commercial thing. I mean, would that we had so much power. We don't. I think it's probably more to do with the past 2 years and getting in low traffic neighbourhoods, where there was a lot of shouting by the aunties to say that, you know, Cycle Islington had a hotline to the council, and, you know, the usual stuff that went on. And maybe they are trying to regulate that so that they can prove that there's an NDA and that we're not getting any privileged information. Really don't know. It wasn't really explained very well.
Sounds a bit worrying. So if anyone's got any guidance on that, then do chip it into the chat. And then I think we'll come to Ruth now. Ruth, you were going to share something newsy, topical, local to you.
Yeah, hi. Well, it's nice to have some positive stuff to share. In London, Cycleway 9, which has taken a very, very long time to be implemented, which is meant to go from Heathrow, all the way to, through High Street Kensington, but we all know that High Street Kensington have blocked it. But Hammersmith have opened their section round Hammersmith Broadway, which was a very, very nasty gyratory, where people have been killed. There have been lots of crashes, and it was open last week, and it's absolutely phenomenal. Even being in Holland, where I am now, cycling, it's almost as good as Dutch standard. So any of you who come to London, do have a look at it. But it is fantastic. It joins up with Chiswick. It joins Olympia, which goes towards High Street Ken. They've made it very neat. It is almost perfect. There's something I will say towards the end, but it's as good as it gets, with proper drop curbs, beautifully signposted, and it's very exciting. It is a real game changer.
Thanks, Ruth. So is there anyone else who'd like to share a bit? Any news? Could be small, could be big, could be local, could be something that struck you. We'll just do this for another couple of minutes, then we'll move on to the next part of the session.
Sorry, Claire, could I just ask another question or make another observation about the Transport for South East consultation, please? As Becky said, it's a £45 billion budget. 20 billion of that is to build new roads for cars. And they want that money up front. So that's the first chunk of the investment, is they want £20 billion to build new roads for cars. Of the entire budget, 0.5% is for active travel. So you can see the general thrust of the thing, and I think it reflects very clearly on Becky's observation about East Sussex's leadership of that group, is that they still believe the car is the future. Everyone's going to have one, you know. So it's I personally think it should be something that Active Travel England should be picking up and wading in on.
So are you got what you need to do on that, Scott? Got the email address, and sounds a good place to start, and that sounds horrific. Okay, so the before we move into our speaker section, this felt like a good point to just ask.
More hands up, Claire.
Oh, sorry, I
can you see?
I can't see them. I must. Right. Sorry, Sally, you go. Sally, Robin, John. Yeah.
I'll just be really quick. Just to say, Newcastle Council had their first Youth Climate Summit today, which I went to as an expert. and they split into 3 different groups which looked at different aspects of carbon reduction, and the leader of the council, the new leader of the council, Nick Kemp, came and to listen to what these young people kind of wanted. The group that I was working with asked for more cycle lanes. We'd looked at various different examples of things that had happened in different cities and how you could increase active travel, and they were really taken with Seville and the kind of, you know, the speed and just seeing the numbers of how, you know, how much cycling increased when you implemented something like that quite quickly. And the leader of the council responded and, you know, talked through how some of the things that have been asked for, they were sort of underway in some way, or you know, they could lobby for, and said that they do have, you know, cycle lanes planned, but that they're divisive, which I think we all know. And we're just hopeful that the new leader of the council can come down on the right side of that. We have, as Claire was saying, Graham Grant, who was the Assistant Director of Transport here, who effectively head of highways, has gone to Active Travel England. So we've had a lot of change. We have a chief exec change relatively recently as well. So for us, we've now got all this funding. We have loads of really good plans, and we're a bit nervous about what's going to happen next, about, you know, how they're going to be delivered. So watch that space, really.
Thanks, Sally. Robin, would you like to share anything?
Yeah, just a quick one. I mean, quite a lot happening in Oxfordshire at the moment, but perhaps most interesting, we had some bollards set on fire night before last. You might have seen that on Twitter. So 2 bollards in our newish LTNs. In the middle of the night, somebody, or maybe a couple of people, poured something on them and then set them on light. One of them was melted to a point where there was enough left that if you drove over it, you'd really wreck the underneath of your vehicle. So it actually proved to be a more effective bollard than it originally was, which was quite karmic. The various reports have been passed on to the yes, quite passed on to the police. So the police haven't been very active. So this has prompted a new wave of reports to the police and prompting them into hopefully some kind of action. We really need to see some people fined or at least arrested to discourage them from doing this criminal stuff, because after all, these are basically safety measures. Anyway, I'll leave it there. There's plenty of good content to come, isn't there?
Thanks, Robin. And John? From, I can't see your location. Camden.
I couldn't find the mute button. Hello. Yeah, I just wanted a couple of things about Camden. It's nothing spectacular, lots of steady progress. A lot of permeability improvements, LTN coming up for being made permanent, recommendation to make that permanent, pushing out protected cycle lanes on main roads. So it's all incremental, nothing as spectacular as C9 and Hammersmith, but and also including opening up a more direct route, which is now going to have to do instead of the main route on a major road that TfL nixed because of bus impact on bus journey times, but opening up a parallel route, fairly direct, and involving contraflows, and actually very close to where I think David Dansky is going to talk about. So just wanted to put a pitch in there that Camden are just getting on with things as usual. So nothing spectacular, but all good stuff. Thanks.
Thanks, John. I think it's always good to know where places are just getting on with stuff, and hold those up as examples. I can't see anyone else who's got anything to share. While we just see if there's any last news items. One thing I will just share from a sort of Greater Manchester point of view is, I mean, there's lots to talk about. You know, we are hoping that the new Active Travel Commissioner and Transport Commissioner, who just started in the last month or so, will help speed up the pace of delivery. But I think one thing that is we are hoping will to help make more of a thing, we as in Walk Ride is school streets outside London, you know, still a fairly nascent thing. And I think it's been interesting listening to Chris Boardman talking in the last few weeks when he's kind of started to feel able to speak in this new role without the kind of shackles of setting up the organisation. Definitely talking about travel to school and the school run. I think in the interview he gave to Telegraph, he's like, that's top of his kind of hit list of things to sort out. And he's very much talking about, you know, safety and lowering speed limits and dangerous driving and speeds being. So I think it's really interesting how he's kind of positioning things at the start of his more vocal part of his new role. And that's something that we certainly feel in Greater Manchester we need to do as well, just kind of make sure we're consistently kind of keeping active travel in the right position, and it being about safer streets and children and travel to school, and not about you know, people in lycra and just a very niche part of the population. So that's something that's happening in Greater Manchester more. We've got funding for some school streets trials in each of the boroughs, and those are starting to come to the fore now. One thing I wanted to ask the room before we move on is anyone aware of any council outside London applying to use the new moving traffic offences powers?
Yes.
Is anyone on the call aware of
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Robin's got his hand up. Robin, what can you tell us?
Oxfordshire is the next one after London and Cardiff. Quick off the mark.
So for anyone who doesn't know, moving traffic offences, these are things like parking in a bike lane, and till now the councils either couldn't enforce it, or if they did, they couldn't keep the money. I can't remember which, but anyway, now they can. Is that right? Anyone correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a bit of a game changer for, you know, just low level enforcement of things that are really obstructive to walking and cycling. Can you share any more, Robin?
Yes. So they're going to be the cameras. So Oxfordshire has, because that's the traffic authority, has applied for the Section 6 powers, or whatever they're called. I think gained them, or pretty close to gaining them. Maybe it's a process it has to go through. Anyway, it's in the process, and has also it's consulted on positions to put about 10 or 11 cameras. Most of them are on kind of no left turns and things like that. Some of them in low traffic neighbourhoods. There's also a couple of box junctions on big roundabouts where it's sensible to you want to keep the box junctions free so the roundabouts don't congest. That's much less an active travel issue. But some of them, I think 8 out of the 10 will really help active travel by policing useful traffic restrictions. And this also clears the path. One of the issues we've had, there's a big debate on bollards versus ANPR, because if you in LTNs and traffic filters, because if you go to ANPR you get lots of people wanting exceptions, but this clears the path to use ANPR when there's not a bus route, because outside London you can't at the moment use it unless there's a bus route, but this clears the path for at least having the option open. So I will look up the over the next minute or two. I'll look up the webpage of where they're going to be, and people who know Oxford will at least be able to figure out where those are. They're also very helpful for policing mopeds, who run a lot of the traffic filters. Hopefully in 3 years' time they'll all be riding e-bikes, but at the moment there's a lot of mopeds.
Thanks for that. I've got so there's a list been shared in the chat, but we're just clarifying what that is, but perhaps Adam or Beth is going to shed some light on that. Adam?
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
2 comments, sorry.
Apologies, yeah, it's just that Baines have also been saying they've done 5 locations, but they're very much around moving, obviously turning left turns, keeping box junctions clear. However, they have stated they intend to use them going forward for school streets, but they haven't as yet. They want to get the first lot through, so that's it.
There we go. I've got
And
the list there. Rising bollards. Yeah, some of them are rising bollard sites where the bollards occasionally break.
And then Beth, was there anything you wanted to add or a new thing?
Yeah, I was just gonna say about the new powers, just to kind of sort of let people know, because I didn't really understand this when I first heard about it. Thought it sounded like this amazing silver bullet. Oh, brilliant! The answer to all our prayers. You know, it's going to be amazing. But we've got a very nice guy who manages the traffic team at my council, who's really supportive of things like school streets and all of that stuff, and really wants to do it. But he explained to me the situation, because I saw that list that was published and said, I thought we were doing this, and you know, why are we not in that list of 10 councils? Well, it's essentially, it sounds like it's one of those things that the government's announced, and it sounds great, but when you actually look at the huge series of hoops that you have to jump through, it's actually a bit of a nightmare. And so the legislation was passed on the 31st of May, but what's happened now is that the local highway authorities have to do a public consultation on being able to do this, then apply to the DFT with the specific sites that they want to use the powers for. So they can't just say, we want to use the powers, is that okay, brilliant, let's crack on. It's, we've done a public consultation, the public are in favour of us using these new powers for these specific sites. They then apply to the DFT, and then Parliament twice a year will consider the applications. So if you miss the chance once, you've got to wait a whole 6 months before Parliament will then consider the next wave of applications. And then once we have the powers, we can then choose future sites as long as they are all publicly consulted on. And I think that's a complete joke, because it's saying, hi public, are you all right if we enforce the law? I think it's absolutely incredible. But I just wanted to kind of put it out there that it is not a straightforward and simple process for local authorities to do.
Absolutely brilliant description there, Beth. And I'm wondering if your friendly chap would come on and talk to us about it.
He might do. I can ask him.
Amongst friends. And on that note, we'll bring the news section to a close now. And we were going to ask you to think about, it'd be good to start thinking about if there are any future speakers that you'd like to suggest. I've just thought, oh yeah, that would be a good one, Beth. But yeah, for our new run, which will start in September, are there any speakers you want to propose, any topics you think we should be covering? Ideally, it's always good to propose a topic with a speaker, but if you don't know a speaker related to that topic, but you can always just suggest the topic and we'll try and have a think. I'm also thinking about different types of formats as well. So, you know, maybe we could have 2 speakers on once and do more of a panel conversation, or we could have a kind of, you know, clinic session where people kind of pose questions in a kind of Q&A style, or so we don't always have to do the same format. So maybe have a think now. We'll pick up the end, and we're going to pick this up next week as well, just to get your input into speakers. But at that point, we'll bring this section to a close, and I'm going to move into the speaker part of the forum tonight and ask our guest, David Dansky. So I'll just introduce David. So David, as I said at the beginning, is a cycle trainer. It's a company called Bike Works, and he works on a lot of different projects on helping people to ride, helping more people to ride, and helping drivers to understand how to share the roads. And one of the things he's working on is a project called Side by Side Taxi. So that's where, you know, people ride next to each other. So he's a campaigner like we are, but he's also someone who's experienced a really terrifying road crash, and we cover a lot on this, on Ideas with Beers, about road safety, about infrastructure, about how to make things safer. And David wanted to talk tonight about, or we asked David to talk tonight about his experience. So on that note, David, I'm going to hand to yourself, and you have got a few slides to share your story.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Claire, and thank you for inviting me to speak. And as Claire said, I would rather have been invited to talk about some other work that we've been doing over the past few years, including the image I've got here, which is a picture of me next to a lovely lady, where we take people out for a spin, a trip of their choice. And we're just rolling out with a big project through the DFT Tackling Loneliness Fund to run this across London. So there's going to be a whole load of side-by-side taxis, four-seaters around London. However, I'm a cycle trainer and I had a crash. So I woke up in an ambulance, and the first thing I thought was, how does a cycle trainer have a crash? And how invalidating is that? You know, I spend my life telling people cycling is about as risky as walking and all the various statistics that you will know very well. And here I am waking up in an ambulance and wondering what's going on. And in fact, a bit about the background to the crash. So it was 8 months ago, it was the 24th of October in Camden on the junction between St Pancras Way and Bain Street. And I was traveling to work. So I live in West London, in Hammersmith, and I was traveling to the Olympic Park where our office is based, and I had a meeting with Michael Barrett from TfL about some work we were planning to do around cargo bikes. I didn't get to the meeting because I ended up, as you saw, in an ambulance. So I'm going to describe what I learned about a particular crash. So I was cycling north on St Pancras Way. That's the yellow line in the image. I was on a cycle lane, a segregated cycle lane crossing Bain Street, which is one way. And a taxi driver turned across me and hit me. It's called a T-bone crash. He hit me side on. And he knocked me, as he said, as I'll show you in a later slide, into that wall, where my back, I assume, hit the corner of the wall and my head hit at the flat bit of the wall, and I had a minor head injury, but that wasn't the main injury. What I do remember before I woke up in the ambulance was I was cycling, and I remember as a cycle trainer not really remembering, I was passing a side road, and one rule of cycle training is if you're cycling past the side road, you look into the side road. And I looked into the side road, and clearly there was nothing going to be coming out of it because it's a one-way street. And the second look you do is looking to see if any oncoming vehicles are turning right. And I did see a taxi driver driving his taxi, a black London cab, quite fast. And I remember putting my hand out at the last minute because I could see he had not seen me or was not slowing. And that was it. That's all I remember. So I woke up in that ambulance. Now, first questions people were asking me was, were you wearing a helmet? Where's your helmet? And then since then, until yesterday, in fact, almost every person I spoke to has been asking me that particular question. And I keep having to tell everyone I had a minor head injury, but actually the driver broke my spine. He broke 2 vertebrae, thoracic vertebrae 11 and 12. So I had 2 burst vertebrae, had 5 broken ribs and a minor head injury. So quite a lot of pain, and I kind of ate morphine basically for the first couple of weeks and various other painkillers, even to date when I'm on much less analgesia than morphine, but it's still sitting down for a long period, standing up for it gets really achy. So in hospital for 2 weeks. Now, the driver, David, he left his details with the police, which I really appreciated. So, you know, and when I woke up, when I was in hospital, I messaged him through WhatsApp just to say, well, this is where I am, this is what happened. And we had a brief WhatsApp exchange, including him describing that I impacted on his right. I won't read it out to you. You can see it's on that slide. And he said also that he had dash cam footage, which subsequently never turned up. and he went, there was kind of radio silence after a day, which I assume he'd gone to his insurers and reported the crash, and they just told him not to speak to me, which is fair enough. I'm kind of thinking now that it would be, when it's all over and when all the insurance stuff is all over, it would be nice to sit down with a beer with him and just see how he is. Quite interesting to see how the effect of crashing into a vulnerable, I don't like that term, crashing into someone who's not in a car or someone who is in a car, what's the effect on them? So that's something at the back of my mind, and I'll probably consult my lawyer before I do that. So I've not heard anything more from him, and I know the police did speak to him, and apparently the dash cam, the card, the SD card or whatever with the footage, there wasn't one in on that particular day, even though he thought there was initially. So I was 2 weeks in hospital, which was kind of during obviously COVID time, which means my partner couldn't visit me, and it was very kind of let's say lonely and painful. And then I was fitted on the first day with a back brace, which I had to wear for 3 months because they were concerned that a fragment of the spine would damage my spinal cord. So I really had to immobilize my whole torso. I was also not meant to, for the first month, not meant to rise more than 45 degrees up in a bed. So I couldn't like sit up, I couldn't sit in a chair. I had to sort of have this range between lying flat on my back and 45 degrees. And then the back brace was removed, and I found that I'd lost all my core strength, and it was quite difficult to just to do anything. I couldn't ride a bike, for example. And I filled in all the police forms. I had to do a diagram, and the police notified me that they're not able to prosecute. There was no witnesses. There was no CCTV, and there was no dash cam footage. So even though at 9 o'clock in the morning in central Camden, I was quite surprised about that. But I just have to be credulous and accept things as they were stated. And my lawyer advised me that actually, because that brief WhatsApp exchange that I'd had with the driver, the lawyer, the driver's insurance kind of admitted liability really early on, which really helped, because if he hadn't done that, I'm not sure how the story would have gone, which meant that I couldn't work for a couple of months, and I was covered through loss of earning paid through his insurers. His insurers paid for a caseworker to liaise with various other services to help with my rehabilitation. I had an ergonomic workspace assessment and ended up with a bit of kit, which means I've got a desk that goes up and goes down and various other things. I'm still seeing my physiotherapist now bi-weekly, and I had a psychological assessment, and she thought I had mild PTSD, basically because I was ranting around about the motorization of the UK and everything's focusing on drivers, and I would have done that prior to the crash, but that was her conclusion anyway. So a bit of anger about the transport situation in the country. I have an independent medical assessor on Harley Street, would you believe, which was quite a gloat to my mates, but he's independent, and his role is just to report to the insurance company and my lawyer about his view on my injuries. And the latest I got from him was that over the next between 1 and 2 years since the crash, my symptoms should be significantly less, but he thinks that I will continue to experience symptoms beyond that. So that was depressing. I found electric scooters. So I know there's a bit of controversy about electric scooters, and I know Bob Davis doesn't like them, but I love them. I think I've done a lot of work with some of these scooter companies, and was fortunate to have been given one of the shared electric scooters, not the one in the picture, which I began to use since I couldn't really sit down too well. I could actually stand up, and it was really good for core strength. So that e-scooter, that moment when I could actually get out independently and go out to the shops by myself without having to rely on anyone to bring me stuff, was amazing. So e-scooter independence. And since then, I've begun some tentative cycling again. So I am back on my bike, and I have done some biggish trips. But if I make a trip more than, say, 10 miles, I'm then in pain for a couple of days. So I went back to the crash location, and coincidentally bumped into John Chamberlain from Camden Cyclists, and we both had a look and had a chat about Camden Council were consulting on that area, any infrastructure improvements. And my view at the time was, it's a mess. So you can see the road markings. There is a bizarre giveaway line on a diagonal, which you don't see that anywhere. So drivers probably don't construe, some drivers probably don't construe that it is a give way situation. Also, the cycle lane is kind of standard cycle lane width, contraflow to a single lane one-way road going beyond the junction, and there's a kind of little filter lane for right turning vehicles into Baines Street. The taxi driver said in that brief exchange that he did not even know there was a cycle lane there and did not even think to look there. And to be honest, I kind of believe that. I think the infrastructure is so unusual, and it's not, you're driving a car, you're used to the way certain things look. And I suppose if it was a standard two-way road and I was just cycling past the normal side road, he would know and to look to oncoming drivers before he turned right. But he didn't think to look for oncoming cyclists in a narrowish cycle lane. Not that, I mean, it's not a particularly narrow cycle lane. I haven't been back since, so John will probably know much more what it looks like now. Clearly, it's under a railway bridge, and if the sun's shining, you can see in the picture there's a kind of light and shade issue. So I'm not sure whether the driver was affected by a light that he didn't see me. And it is a racing line for driving. John and I observed what was going on there, and very few drivers decelerated like they would approaching a standard give way line before doing that right turn. They were just whizzing around the corner. In the report to the police, David, the taxi driver, claimed he was going at 5 miles an hour, which is absolutely bonkers because I wasn't hit at 5 miles an hour. So that's kind of my, let's say, amateurist conclusions about what happens. And I'm quite keen to go there again and see what the situation is now. So thank you very much again for inviting me. And if you've got any questions or comments, I'm happy to hang around and answer them.
Thank you so much, David. And I hope that felt cathartic and useful to do that with this supportive group of people. So you clearly had some observations there about how the infrastructure could have been designed better. Is that something that you would have thought before the crash, or is it only the experience that's sort of really brought that home to you? That's
a good question. So I don't know, I've been around in this business for quite a lot of years, and I've kind of like, I've always believed in mixed measures in terms of encouraging people to cycle and keeping things as simple as possible. And I've always thought that particular bit of infrastructure, while very well-meaning, was not particularly good. There's a lot of cycle infrastructure, old school cycle infrastructure, which everyone on this chat will know about, such as old school cycle lanes, which were put in as a sop to cyclists, and they actually made things more risky. And for infrastructure to really work, it has to be top class. And if it's subclass, so yes, I would have thought very similarly to that prior to my crash. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for David? I've got a couple more, but others may want to come in. From John, if you've got, what's it like now? Because I do need to go back there, but I haven't made it yet.
Yes, actually, John's from the, yeah, come on. John,
I'm
come
really
in.
sorry. I'm going to have to go. I've got another meeting, and I didn't. If I had known you were on, David, I would have postponed that meeting. Just to say that junction now should be redundant, because part of the new infrastructure Camden put in is a straight across, so you wouldn't be doing this dog leg that you were doing. I absolutely agree with you that a motorist would often not expect or not be looking for the cycle lane coming towards them. But this must be very common in any road with a contraflow cycle lane. But I think what's happening here is the motorist is making a couple of quick turns. They're not getting used to the road, as you say, the racing line, and it's the classic, sorry, I didn't see you, mate. He probably looked right at you and did not see you. You know, it's the classic left hook. It's how you kill motorcyclists and cut cyclists sometimes. Just did not see you. He was looking for a car. He was looking for a lorry. He was maybe even checking there weren't pedestrians, but he wasn't looking for a cyclist, and so he didn't see a cyclist. Now you could discuss, you know, the layout of the junction. Could it be improved? Don't know. It's now redundant, because that is no longer the routing. So if you went that way today, you almost certainly wouldn't come that way. But sorry, I have to go. I've got another meeting I'm chairing. So, but George and Jean are also here from Camden. So if there's any more discussion, I'm sure they'll pick up. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, John. That's great to get that update. Graham.
Yeah, I was interested in the police response, because I understand there wasn't perhaps not sufficient evidence, but I have similar experience with the police, whereby it was actually 9 years ago, myself and my daughter were waiting to go onto a roundabout in a queue. We reached the front of the queue, and the driver behind accelerated into the back of us. Now, it was quite clear the reason that this happened was because of the way roundabouts are designed in this country, because the driver was looking right and driving left. But the attitude of the police was, when I contacted them, that, oh, this is just an insurance matter. And that was it. They weren't interested in the fact that this driver was clearly driving without due care and attention, because we'd been right in front of the driver for quite a while. So I just wonder whether that attitude amongst the police is changing, or whether that had a bearing on your experience.
I don't think that's what bizarrely the policeman was also called David. I don't think David, the PC David, or whatever rank he was, they investigated, just assumed the insurance would pick it up, because they might not. I mean, they're clearly someone's in the, maybe subsequently since the changes in the highway code and responsibility, it might well be that insurers would have to assume that the driver was at fault, but this was prior to that, and I suppose the claim that there was no CCTV, it was quite quiet, and it was COVID time, so no witnesses perhaps. What got me was the fact that the police, after he'd actually said he's got dashcam footage in that WhatsApp exchange, the police kind of just accepted, okay, you haven't got it, you didn't put in the cassette or whatever they put in nowadays to report that, and clearly just the extent of injuries, the speed he was going around that corner, there was no way that they didn't kind of question the fact that he claimed he was going at 5 miles an hour. If he was going on 5 miles an hour, I might have bumped over his bonnet a bit, and that's it, not been flying towards a wall with blood spatting up the wall, which is what the taxi driver described. So I am slightly dubious about the police, but I'm not sure whether they just assumed that the insurers would pick it up. I mean, it's hard to say, isn't it?
Mm. Thanks, Graham. And one point from me then, David, is about the many questions it sounded like you got about wearing a helmet, and whether you've become sort of more militant's the wrong word, but you know, it sounds like you don't have a lot of sympathy for that, and you know, lots of people on this call have strong views about helmets in why, you know, they're a complete red herring. And so again, do you feel that I mean, talking to people about that, did you change any minds? Did people kind of, yeah.
I had to make the argument. I mean, I'm of the red herring school, as some of you might know on this call, and completely pro-choice on that issue, and not really supportive of helmet promotion. People should make their own minds, and I've not changed that view at all. And I don't really. It's such an entrenched thing, isn't it? Helmets that I've kind of, for years now, I've just not been bothered arguing the toss about that, to be honest, because it's just too much of a waste of energy. One thing I did notice, I suppose linked to the psychological assessment, is I do feel a bit shivery if I am on the road or walking or scooting or cycling and I see a black cab in my peripheral vision. That's a bit, oh shit, sorry. That's a bit scary still, and it's kind of shifted me slightly to my original view as a cycle trainer, is if you're a bit nervous, get some cycle training, skill up a bit, plan a route that doesn't involve going on a crap A road, and look where your local cycling infrastructure is, and that's it. You don't need to dress like a Christmas tree, as they say, and that view's not changed at all. But I'm still a bit nervous now, much more than a bit maybe, and to have changed my routes on whatever vehicle I'm using since then. Normally I would have been happily to bomb down Euston Road to get to the Olympic Park, which I normally would have done, but I chose to go, just because it was a nice morning, a quiet route through Camden instead of going the Euston Road. This was before they built that cycle lane there. So I probably would have been much safer going down the Euston Road in the bus lane.
Yeah. I actually realised I missed the comment in the chat that I should pick up on. So some of our regulars would know Dave H, who is a regular attendee up in Glasgow, and Elizabeth shared that she's in regular contact with Dave. Had a really nasty crash, and not sure of the details, but Bob reported that in one of his news updates. So just sharing from Elizabeth that she's in regular contact with Dave. Elizabeth, I don't know if you want to say anything before we move out of this section and just start to wrap up. Otherwise, people can read your comment in the chat, which is nice to get some news of Dave.
And I know Dave was doing his very best to get to Sheffield if he can. Would like to borrow a hand cranked vehicle because, would like to continue to be active. But they've been really frustrated that there isn't any kind of official report. This, 2 weeks in hospital, and that won't be a statistic anywhere. The police weren't called. And that's one of the things that I was then wondering about is, would it have been worthwhile? It is the thing that Dave most especially at this stage wishes had happened, is that the police had been called and there was an official record.
So in your experience, David, was it worthwhile involving the police?
Yes, it was. I think the well, you have to test it, don't you? You have to involve the police. I don't know if there's any, if you can progress anything else without actually having an official report from the police. And the insurers did have a bit of a, my lawyer did have a little bit of a toing and froing with the police, and there was a moment when she said to me, well, we could take this a bit further and challenge a few of the things that he said, though I would advise, if you want to do that, we'll support you on that. But since the insurers have admitted liability, there's no any real point apart from to make a kind of statement. And I kind of agreed with that. I mean, your energy levels after an incident like that are pretty low, and to have to deal with it, have the mental space to deal with another discussion as well as with the insurers, I was quite pleased actually just to drop that. Prior to the crash, I might have advised someone, no, you've got to really see if you can get a conviction. And the fact that the driver left his details, and not like the whatever percentage, 29% of hit and run drivers I always felt kindly disposed towards him anyway. So, and he's a professional driver, and I genuinely believe that he didn't see me, and he clearly didn't do it on purpose, and he was clearly remorseful and admitted it. So I just let it go.
Thank you. Thanks again. And I wish I were seeing you under different circumstances. Fabulous to see you though.
Nice to see you again, Elizabeth.
And Sally's made a really good point in the chat, which I was going to make, which is even if you're involved in really minor things, which clearly this wasn't, it's worth reporting them via the police website, because it then gets recorded in the official stats, and that is used and often cited, you know, when decisions are made about infrastructure. So get incidents recorded, and then they can say, oh, well, there's been 3 incidences here. If it's not reported, then that's not the case. Okay, well, I think we will thank you, David, and
nice to see you all. Yeah,
and at this point, we've had some really useful proposals in the chat conversation for speakers. So one of the things that we were going to try and do is bring in a live link from from Sheffield, where we've got at least one of our regulars, Roxanne, is hoping to dial in. And we were just going to see if there's if the technology could work. So Roxanne, are you here? It's a bit like the Eurovision Song Contest. No. Roxanne, are you there?
She's in the
Heard my name. Was that my name, Claire?
That was you. There you are. You're in the car park.
We are at the bar in the sunshine in Sheffield. Everybody say hi. Hi. We're still slightly lower numbers because the free wine at the event is still flowing. It's all running a bit late, but those of us who wanted the sunshine are here, and the ideas, the beers, the margaritas are all flowing. And it's been an absolute joy to see people in real life that we've previously only seen in a little square on Zoom. I suppose I'm here to report on the event and share some insights. Would that be appreciated?
Yeah, a couple of headlines, Roxy, would be great.
Okay, well, for me, I went to the cargo bike event in the morning, and we heard a lot about cargo bike projects in Essex in particular. And there was a lot of debate about how far do we go with training to ensure people are safe, comfortable operating cargo bikes, but we don't want to go too far that it becomes unattainable or exclusive and people can't actually access those cargo bikes or that training. But then also, what are the implications for insurance? If we insist on training, will we stop getting insurance if we don't have enough training? And how hard is it to get insurance? But also, we're now getting data to show just how safe cargo bikes are. Therefore, that should hopefully make insurance easier and more affordable. So I find that quite interesting, particularly because I have a massive insurance bill for the one cargo bike that my organization uses. But also there's the value of cargo bikes that makes them expensive. So it was quite good. It was a lot about the logistics of cargo bikes. There's probably some more to say around family cycling, perhaps another session for that. We then moved on to the main plenary, which had some wonderful speakers from Sheffield. I will admit I've been in Sheffield for a few days, and I've been out on a tour with some people from Sheffield Cycling Campaign, Sheffield Cycles. They're here too. And so I was intrigued to ask the various representatives from Sheffield why their modal filters are still sitting on the verge and haven't been put in the road yet. Sadly, didn't get an answer about that, but Sarah Story did do a great talk about what are cycling commissioners, what they should be doing, and I'm hoping to chat to her so that we can get a cycling commissioner for Cambridge. So that was quite useful. A very, very impassioned speech from the Director of Public Health, and I'm very sorry, can't remember his name right now, but the Director of Public Health for Sheffield was probably one of the most striking speeches I've heard from a public health official about how important active travel and cycling is. So I'll get his name and I'll put it in the chat, but I think we should try and get him to come to Ideas with Beers. It was fantastic. Another amazing speaker I didn't get to hear, but let me see if someone else can give a talk, because several people have told me how fantastic she was. Excuse me, Simon, could you please talk about the amazing physicist of lasers? The amazing physicist of lasers. I didn't get to go. Simon will give her an update.
Hiya. This feels very odd. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Simon.
So
give us it in a minute.
Jenny Clark from Living Streets in Sheffield, who is a physicist who works with lasers and safety. She's in charge of safety for whichever institution, university, something like that she's involved in. Basically just did the presentation that wiped the floor with myself and everyone else on the panel, that basically was about how she applies health and safety executive kind of risk assessments and statistics to road danger for her kids. Boy, that was a tearjerker. That was full on. That was and then included right at the end a video of her and her kids running across the widest displayed junction I think I have ever seen anywhere and nearly getting taken out. It was a tour de force. So yeah, get her for Ideas with Beers, please.
Well, yeah. on that subject, yeah, Roxy, if you could, while you're drinking your non-alcoholic margaritas and the rest of it, we've had the speaker idea chat here, but if you can get the ideas of the guys and gals there, that would be great. And
yep, I've started a list of ideas to be shared with Ideas with Beers. Great speakers, and even those we've got the whole program, so we can pick out the people that we think sound great. And then the other session that I attended, well, I did get lost and I went to the wrong session and then realized they weren't talking about LC whips. So I did miss the part about LC whips, but we did have a bit of talk about road safety assessments, and I'm probably in a different category here where people tell me that road safety assessments can be done objectively. I thoroughly disagree with that. So I felt quite uncomfortable in that session, but again, I'm in a slightly different world there. And I would say last week I also hosted the author Markelte Brummelstroot. I cannot say it, it's Dutch, I can't make the sound. And he's written a book called Movement. I hope we can also get him as a speaker, but having just finished that book this morning and then gone to a talk about how road safety audits are objective, I felt myself getting a bit grumpy. So I'd like to share the reasoning for that when I'm not at a pub with our Ideas with Beers friends. So hopefully we can get Marco and his co-author Talia to come and have a chat with us as well. But that's about it for day one.
Thanks, Roxanne. And before you go, so yeah, do come up with some ideas. We'll add them to the list. And Ruth wants to ask you to ask something. The thing I would like to do, we've got our feelers out for some active Travel England speakers. But if you happen to bump into Brian, formerly of this parish, then you clearly need to shame him into coming to speak at Ideas with Beers. So
now I'm Brian has a very important official job now, and I can't say that I've necessarily spoken with him, but perhaps if he was to turn up at the pub and we all did a slow clap, I have a feeling that may be appreciated and encouraging. But it was really good to see how busy the Active Travel England stand was. People were queuing up to meet with Brian and his colleagues. And of course, if there is a VIP drinks, apparently it's not ours. We think it is, but perhaps we'll see some of the VIPs joining us later, and we'll put a nudge in to get some more speakers there too.
Cool. Ruth, is there something you wanted to ask?
Yeah, Roxanne, before we all go, one of the most important things that I'm witnessing here in Holland is traffic lights which react to cyclists. So when there's no cars, they automatically change to green. They change to green when it's raining, and they change to green at night, which is much safer, especially for women cycling alone. We are told that our light systems are all being updated. We still don't have this. So I think it's a really important feature of active travel. And if there's anyone you could ask why we're so outdated with our traffic light systems, given that it's been in existence in Holland for so long, that would be marvellous.
I missed, so the session on safe junctions has happened. That would have been ideal, but Ruth, note taken, and I'll see what I can do. And I will channel Marco. And he would say, well, why? Why do we even have traffic lights? They're there for cars, not for people cycling. Do we need to be even more imaginative? But we'll get him to come and talk about that. But yeah, I'll try and get you an answer, Ruth.
It's when you approach them and they magically change to green, it's just the best thing ever.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Right. Thank you. The live link up from Sheffield. And look, the weather is good in the north, so that's proof. Thank you everyone for coming this week. Goodbye, Sheffield. Goodbye, familiar faces there. Brilliant. And thanks everyone for taking part in this week's session. Next week we've got thanks, Roxanne. Next week we've got who have we got next week, Sally?